team call. My name is Marty Abbott. I'm Executive Director of ACTFL, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and in particular, those of you who answered our survey in advance. It enabled us to take a look at your responses and really frame the information that we'll be sharing with you today, so we appreciate that. As always, this call will be recorded, and we will post it later if you don't have a chance to listen to the entire call today, and we'll also be posting these PowerPoint slides, so you'll have a chance to review them or share them with your team if you'd like to do that later. As you all know, on our advocacy calls in the past, we're going to keep everybody muted so that we can share some information, and later on we'll be having Amanda Seawald, the president of the Foreign Language Educators of New Jersey, share a state story, and we'll be commenting along the way and trying to answer all the questions that you sent in advance. But please do use the chat room if you have a comment or a question that you want to make right now, and we'll be attempting to answer it either during the phone call or later on we'll follow up with you individually. I'm pleased to be here today with Trey Calvin, who's a member of the ACTFL staff. He'll be talking a little bit later, but we're going to kick it off at the federal level, at the national level, with Jill Allen Murray and Matt Schlesinger from the Sheridan Group, who will be talking about what's going on at the federal level with the various pieces of legislation that we're dealing with right now. So I'll turn it over to Jill and Matt.
Okay, thanks, Marty. So in terms of federal advocacy and appropriations work, we spent the last quarter and really a lot of the last year focusing on Title 4A of the Every Student Succeeds Act, commonly known as ESSA. We've discussed it a bit on previous calls, and what it is the block grant program that's intended to provide schools with flexible dollars to spend on a well-rounded education. Well-rounded education, as I'm sure many of you know, is a fairly all-encompassing term. Funds from this block grant can be used with some restrictions for really anything, subjects like world language, phys ed, civics, APs. The key here really is flexibility, so it's up to the states and localities to make these decisions. We also focused heavily on the Language Flagship program, which is a Department of Defense program that provides foreign language education for both college and K-12 students in what the government determines are critical needs languages. So these are languages that include Arabic, Russian, Portuguese, and others deemed vital to our national security. This program has always been important to ACTFL. It's part of their policy priorities, but there's been a little bit more of a focus on it this year given the current political landscape here in Washington and the fact that both the White House and Congress really want to lower Department of Education funding and increase DoD funding. So it's a good place for us to be focusing on now. Of course, we also continue to monitor Title VI and Fulbright-Hays, as well as the Higher Education Act reauthorization, which is coming down the pike, and we'll talk a little bit more about those in just a few minutes. So just to give you a little bit of context on where we are with Title 4A, back when ESSA was signed into law in 2015, it authorized $1.6 billion for the Title 4A block grant program. At that level, every district in the country would receive funding in proportion to the funding they receive under Title I. In theory, and how it was written to begin with, the federal government was to distribute dollars to the states by formula, and then the states by formula would distribute those dollars to districts, to LEAs. Unfortunately, authorization to spend money is not the same as actually spending that money. So step 2 of the process, after the bill is authorized, is for appropriators in Congress to actually fund the programs in the bill, including the Title 4A program. So for the 2017 fiscal year, which actually ends this weekend on September 30th, Congress appropriated only $400 million, which is obviously nowhere close to the $1.6 billion that was authorized. Now, the way the block grant was set up by the original creators, it was set up to be reliant on adequate funding to be successful. And since there wasn't adequate funding, formula grants ended up being largely impractical because districts would end up getting a real nominal number of dollars. So instead, appropriators in Congress decided to give states the option to run competitions for these funds. Most states are actually still using formula funding, which means that districts in those states will get a relatively nominal number of dollars. But some states have confirmed that they'll be running competitions. So far, those states are Indiana, Minnesota, New York, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. And some other states are coming up with kind of some hybrid creative solutions. For example, Massachusetts is planning to allocate the money by formula, but then if there's extra money or unclaimed funds, they'll award that by competition. Last I heard, Hawaii was planning to just roll the money into Title II, which is the main federal program dealing with teacher quality. For the 2018 fiscal year, the president proposed a wholesale elimination of the grant program. Congress, fortunately, thanks in large part to the work that we did with the Title IV Coalition, rejected the president's proposal, but the funding level is still low. Right now, it's at $450 million in the Senate and $500 million in the House. And the final number is going to be the result of negotiations that will take place during the fall and winter between congressional leadership and leaders on committees in both chambers. And just a note, because we're dealing with a lot of different years here. We have calendar years and school years and fiscal years. These funds are going to be, funds from FY 2017 are available to be obligated by districts until September 2019. So, we're looking at a couple of years here where you can use these funds. So I just mentioned briefly the Title IV Coalition. ACTFL is a very active member, and along with the coalition, we've met with a good number of members of Congress as well as committee staff to ensure that lawmakers and most importantly at this point, appropriators in Congress make sure they understand how important the Title IV program is and how important it is that the program be run as originally intended, as a formula to formula, state, federal, state, local program. So just some things that we've accomplished really in the past quarter and that past 6 months or so. We've had Dear Colleague letters with lots of signatures in both chambers. And while the Senate letter only included Democrats, the House letter actually had a number of Republicans sign on, which is a pretty significant achievement, particularly in the House, which tends to be less bipartisan than the Senate. So two of the letter leads on the House side were Carlos Curbelo, who is a Republican from South Florida, and Elise Stefanik, who is a Republican from upstate New York. So it's promising, and it's good to have them as allies. We also work closely with the Office of Representative Bonamici. She's a Democrat from Oregon, and also, once again, Representative Stefanik, to introduce amendments on the House floor to fully fund the Title IV program. Those amendments did not ultimately end up in increased funding or result in increased funding, but they did put the issue front and center on the House floor during the debate of their omnibus spending bill, which is really the most important and influential bill they passed all year. It's what funds basically the entire government. And in addition, we've worked on setting up briefings on the Hill to educate members and staff. I attended a briefing just a couple weeks ago. Suzanne Bonamici gave the keynote address, and we had a lot of staff there from important members' offices, really learning about Title IV and why it's so important and why it needs to be funded fully. So specifically from the Title IV perspective, we encourage you to find out from your district and from your state whether your state is running a competition for funds. Some states are still deciding. And if they are running a competition, it's really important for you to find out when that competition is being run, when submissions are due. Ultimately, it's a little frustrating from our perspective because it's not going to be uniform across the country. Every state's going to do their own thing and set up their own timetables and their own rules. But we do think that there is still very much an opportunity for your voices to be heard. If your state is running a competition, we encourage you to contact the appropriate official in your district to make sure that your district is submitting a proposal. Whether your state's running a competition or relying on the formula grants, you should always encourage them to use the funds for world language programming. You can also, if you're feeling extra ambitious, and I know Trey will be talking about advocacy a little bit more later, but you can always visit the ACTFL advocacy page, and it'll take you to a link that you can send a letter to your members of Congress, to your senators, to voice your support for Title IV and explain that, you know, it's vital both for K-12 education in general and specifically world language education. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Jill, who's going to talk a little bit more about the DoD and language flagship side of things.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Matt hinted at our work on language flagships. This is a program that's at the Department of Defense, and he also reminded you that ACTFL'S board has put together a legislative agenda. It does include prioritizing funding for the K-12 initiative at the language flagship. So more broadly, the language flagship program offers language programs across the country and partners with universities for undergraduate students in critical languages. So the goal of the program is to graduate students with advanced proficiency in critical needs language so that they can then be recruited into the federal government, likely at DoD or State Department or other agencies. So the idea there is that the federal government has a vested interest in ensuring that we have students who make it through to this advanced level of proficiency. They've come to the realization that it is important to have a pathway that supports K-12 language programs so that those students can come into college at a high enough proficiency level to succeed. So we have been working with both appropriators and defense authorizers to increase funding for this program, but more specifically for the K-12 portion of the program. So through our work, we've built some strong relationships with many offices, but in particular, one member of Congress, Representative Carol Shea Porter. She's a Democrat from New Hampshire and sits on the Armed Services Committee. So we worked with her and her staff and successfully seen her insert an amendment into the National Defense Authorization Act, often referred to as the NDAA here in Washington. It's a must-pass defense bill. You will see it passed every year. And this particular amendment is exciting because it provides the office that administers Flagship the opportunity to eventually make the case that additional funding, particularly for K-12, ought to be increased. So this particular legislative language, I'm not going to read the entire thing to you, but I'll quote a piece of it. It's asking the committee, or the committee rather, is asking the Secretary of Defense to provide the Committee on Armed Services report assessing in part whether current partnerships with K-12 schools are sufficient to provide language proficient students the language flagship program, and whether the need would warrant an expansion of the language and cultural training programs. So exciting that this language could provide an opportunity for increased funding for both K-12 and college level language programs. So even though our primary focus has been on Title IV-A, which Matt talked about, and the language flagship program, we're also paying attention to other important language priorities, including international education programs known as Fulbright-Hays and Title VI. That in particular, I want to give you just a quick update that the House has passed their appropriations bills, and on the other hand, the Senate has been moving more slowly and is yet to put their education funding bill on the Senate floor. The House actually proposed to zero out funding for the Fulbright-Hays program, but kept funding for the domestic focus program for Title VI. The Senate, on the other hand, has fully funded both programs, and that bill, again, has not made it to the Senate floor. What will happen is that these bills, once they get there, will be negotiated between the two chambers, and then we expect that by January we'll see an omnibus bill happen in there. So we have our eyes on that. That one is not a shock to us, but certainly under a tighter budget scenario, we are concerned about funding at the Department of Ed in particular. So I guess lastly here, in terms of our federal update, I want to just give you a sense of what's happening with the Higher Education Act. This is due up for reauthorization. It's set to expire at the end of, or was set to expire at the end of 2013 rather. it was extended to give Congress time to work on a new reauthorization. So they're overdue. Alexander, who I like to say is somebody who you want to see working on pieces of legislation that you want to see move through Congress, is the chairman of the committee that governs this. He's indicated he is anxious to see a reauthorization move through his committee. However, he also oversees healthcare. And as everyone knows in this country, there's been a lot of focus on healthcare in the Senate recently. So they have not had the opportunity to prioritize this, but we expect that they will shift to it at some point soon. The HEA, the Higher Ed Act, it governs student debt and loans, which is highly controversial, but also includes Title II, which includes teacher quality and preparation. So we know, and Marty's going to talk about this, that helping to solve the teacher shortage crisis is a high priority for ACTFL as an organization. This is an area where we will be paying attention to the existing programs that are in HEA and trying to determine whether or not ACTFL can participate in a dialogue around tweaking some of that or continuing to provide additional support for particular programs that attract hard to staff teaching positions. So we expect that this will be taken up in the coming Congress or existing Congress, and look forward to working with you all on policy ideas around it.
Great. Thank you, Jill and Matt. Appreciate that update a lot. I'm really pleased to see Dessa Dawson, who is this year's ACTFL president, on the call. She's from Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Department of Education, and she and I were just talking the other day about Title IV-A in the state of Oklahoma and how challenging it is to get any of these funds allocated for world languages. So I think the advice that Jill and Matt gave today about finding out what's going on in your state and being ready to step in and try to get availability of those funds for world languages is really important. And I just want to stress, Jill was talking about advanced levels of languages for the Flagship. They actually graduate students and on the ACTFL scale at the superior level, which is really interesting because it's filtering down to the K-12 level, and students are actually starting to come out of K-12 with advanced level proficiency. Very exciting for really upping the proficiency levels of our students. So we're going to turn now to the next topic, which Jill foreshadowed there with the teacher shortage areas, and you all probably know that the Department of Education each year categorizes these teacher shortages according to the subject areas that the states report. So we are concerned again this year in 2017-18 with the high number of states, 43 plus the District of Columbia and 2 territories that are reporting some kind of language teacher shortages. So to get these numbers, we pulled from whether the state calls them foreign languages or world languages or dual language immersion or identifies specific languages. You can see the list here on the slide. It's a category, a broad category of areas where states claim the shortage. And if you look at the chart, we're now third after math and special education. It's not a data point that we're proud of, but it does put us on the map in terms of qualifying for some loan forgiveness and some teach grants. So we'll be talking about those in future calls. But as we take a look at some of the resources that we're providing for you all, Trey has put together an interactive map that will show you the current shortages according to the area that the state claims. And then over on the right, and we'll be posting both of these on our website, there's a trending map. And so he's cataloged the last 9 years of shortages across the states. And when you click on your state, you can see the trending there. And the darker states are states that have said that they have the more challenging or the more challenges in terms of teacher shortages in our areas. I just want to say that one of one of our members wrote in and said, what is ACTFL doing to create this new generation of language educators? So I'm going to ask Trey to talk about an initiative that we just launched this past week that hopefully will start to inspire our young people to go into a career in language teaching. Trey?
Thanks, Marty. Hi, this is Trey. At ACTFL, we really want to empower our members to make sure that the future generation of foreign language teachers is abundant, and we don't continue to see these numbers like we've seen over the last 2 decades. So at ACTFL, we've decided to focus on establishing a more powerful pipeline so that we can both increase student interest and enrollment in teacher preparation programs. We've partnered with Educators Rising to develop a toolkit, but also 5 different modules that you as an educator can use to begin the dialogue with your foreign language students. Do you have a 10th grader in your Spanish class who is just not necessarily a whiz at Spanish, but is really, really active and wants to get more involved? Educators Rising is for you. The great thing about our program that we've just put out is that not only do we have 5 modules that you can start with, they're ready to go. We have a program guide for you. So we're with you every step of the way. There's not much preparation that you need to do as a teacher to get this thing going. And we finally have promotional material. So some things that you can post around your school, email your students that says, sign up here, this is our meeting time. So we've really gone the extra mile to try to make it so that you can get started immediately. My next slide here, we have a couple of screenshots from what it would look like when you start the modules. It's very interactive, and we have several resources that go along with it right there on the PowerPoint presentation. As a teacher, all you really need to do is look over your teacher checklist before. Make sure that you're getting all the videos that you need queued up, all the documents that you need to print out, and that's it, and you're ready to go. Marty?
And Trey, you know, we have some inspirational videos that our members have made on the website, and I see that Ted Zero, our National Language Teacher of the Year in 2016, is on the line. He's taken over the advocacy role in Massachusetts for the MAPLA group, and Ted's in one of the videos. So there's some great videos to use with your students to inspire them to think about a career in teaching.
Marty, you're also in one of these videos, and I'd say Paul Sandrock, who's on the call, is also on the video talking about our profession. So that's one of the ways that we're, if I can preface the next slide, leading with languages here at ACTFL. And I'd like to pass it back to Marty so that we can talk about a couple other toolkits that we put out recently. Marty?
That's a good segue, Trey.
Thank you.
I want to highlight the fact that a couple of people asked what are good ways to advocate with our students? What are some tools? What are some materials that you have to help our parents and students understand the importance of languages in terms of a career? If you haven't had a chance to go to the Lead with Languages website, I recommend that you go there. We have a lot of information in terms of career sectors that make heavy use of language capabilities. And so there's a lot of information there that you can use to inspire your students and their parents. And we've had some contests for students where they win. For example, we had a contest where college students studying abroad could win 2 weeks first class Eurail pass. And so they made great use of that and sent back some really interesting blogs about their experiences abroad. So we have a number of activities going on the website, but we just released a new teacher toolkit, and this is just located at the toolkit address on the bottom. It's not on the main website because it's a tool for teachers to use with students, and we have a scavenger hunt where your students can find out more about languages and leading with languages by conducting the scavenger hunt on the website. We also have an opportunity where students can actually create a video and send it in and be featured in terms of a testimonial about how languages have had an impact on on their lives. So we have quite a few materials there for advocacy. We have a podcast called America the Bilingual, and I see Becky Rankin on the call today, and she's been very instrumental in working with Steve Levine on that wonderful podcast, again, highlighting how languages have had an impact in people's lives. So there are a number of ways that you can get involved in terms of sharing all this information with parents and students and guidance counselors, college advisors. You know, we did some national opinion polling, which was interesting with students and parents, and we found, and this is no surprise to any of you on the call today, we found that for high school students, guidance counselors were extremely influential in terms of their choices, and for college students, the college advisors played that same role. So those are the groups that we need to share this information with. We have some great testimonial videos, and we've done a lot with social media. If you haven't already followed us on Twitter and Instagram and some of the other social media venues, we're very active there. And again, your students can submit a video, and they can look at videos made by Nick Kristof from the New York Times and Clarissa Ward from CNN, prominent people who have used languages in their careers, and they talk about the impact there. So I'm going to turn it back over to Trey to give us a quick update on the Seal of Biliteracy situation.
Thank you, Marty. So the Seal of Biliteracy has had a big year this year. We've gotten 4 new just in the last 9 months: Ohio, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware. Congratulations. You can visit, if you haven't heard about it already, the sealbiliteracy.org website and click on your state to find out more about what's in the pipeline.
I want to mention, too, that some of the states have relied on their state organizations. So I'm looking at Oklahoma and Missouri and Nebraska specifically. While their state legislature may not have adopted a seal, those state organizations have been instrumental in promoting a seal of biliteracy through their state organization. So it's happening in a lot of different ways. And we're seeing from William Davis in Arkansas. We know that Arkansas teamed up with their TESOL counterparts, ACTFL, the TESOL people at the state level, and have about to pass their seal soon. So that's a great collaboration.
And William just commented that Arkansas has granted its first 95 Arkansas Biliteracy Awards in May as a pilot program. And this is the kind of things we love to see, a groundswell of your organization to get the ball rolling, so that then you can have evidence to bring to your Department of Education, your legislators, to say, hey, we're doing this and kids want this and it's good for their future. So cheers to you, William, for getting that done, and to all the other pilot programs out there that are working hard on the Seal of Biliteracy. So if you haven't heard of the Seal of Biliteracy, then maybe this is your first call. We do have a lot at ACTFL that we like to distribute, but we're making a big push this year at the annual convention and World Language Expo in Nashville to get people on the same page and to start moving this forward so it becomes not just a few states every year, but nationally covered with Seal of Biliteracy. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we have stuff going on with the Seal of Biliteracy. Each one of these are sessions. You can go and listen to experts talk about what they've done in their states and more. So if you'd like to see more about these specific SEAL sessions, you can go to our online convention program. That's actfl.org, and you want to click on the Convention and Expo tab, and you'll be able to customize your schedule for the day.
We did have a question from someone asking if the Seal of Biliteracy would ever become a national initiative, and we did have a congresswoman from California introduce some funding actually to award the seals, but it didn't pass. And I do believe that this is going to end up being a state-level initiative around the country. We could possibly see something coming up, but right now it really is a state-level initiative. So we encourage you. And Dessa just wrote in, of course, Oklahoma has has always been very inclusive of Native American languages, and she writes, they plan to start their pilot program this year, and they're working with the tribes to make sure that they have appropriate assessments for the Native language students. So that's great. That's great. So we're going to move on to some other state issues that we know are critical to you all.
So in the legislative session of 2017, most of which just came to an end the last couple of months, we've seen a lot of movement, and it's pretty much the same dog and pony show with world languages being equated with computer coding courses. So I'll start with a current legislative update that we're monitoring at the moment. It's in Michigan. As some of you may know, if you're Michigan or not, they have a merit curriculum that's being updated. And right now they're still working on getting it through the Senate. But essentially what they have right now is on the left-hand side. You need a combination of world language and arts credits or a career and technical education program. The career and technical education program is not like Spanish 1 and 2. It's compiled of several courses and an industry standard certificate. What we really want to make sure that you're aware of when it comes to these sorts of issues is that we believe that world language is a 21st century skill. Some people are using that language to make it an all-inclusive credit skill. So the proposed revisions to the curriculum to the right essentially can eliminate world language from a student's, they could go throughout high school and not have to take a foreign language, which we are worried about, but the Senate has not taken it up, and it's been a few months since there's been any updates from the House. So we're going to keep a close eye on that in Michigan. In Maine, we're moving on to a wonderful sort of textbook defeat of a bill. LD 1288 tried to equate proficiency, or tried to redefine proficiency and throw in computer language programming into that definition. That was really scary for us because as foreign language professionals, we take proficiency very seriously. We think the definition helps define our assessments. And I'd like to give a huge shout out to Elena Johnson of Flame, who single-handedly, through direct discussions with her representatives, stopped this bill in its tracks. She actually flipped one of the co-sponsors who originally introduced the bill. That is as good as it gets. Onward to Maryland, we also saw some coding bills, both of which were defeated. Usually what happens if one is not favorably, is voted unfavorably in one chamber, it usually dies in the committee, and that's exactly what we saw here in Maryland this spring. Nothing has resurfaced yet for the 2018 session, but we will make sure to keep you updated. Virginia, same thing happened, where we had a House bill that sought to substitute computer courses for foreign language courses, but never got any support in the Senate. Haven't seen anything to 2018. Florida, this looks like a lot. I'll try to go through really quickly. Let me first say, Linda Markley's on the line, and again, one of our big advocates who really knocks it out of the park when it comes to standing up for and being impassioned about this subject area. I mean, in 2017, we saw the third time in as many years, Jeff Brandes, who's a senator down there, introduced a bill that would have allowed computer coding to be counted as a foreign language. It got a little bit of support in the House, but just fell short of being a mandate. So they wanted to encourage it. Now, in a lot of states, you can pre-file a bill, meaning that you're not going to talk about it just yet, but you're going to put it forward just so we can see what's in the landscape ahead. And in 2018, the same thing has happened. Now, what they've done a little bit differently is that they've listened to our concerns, and they're really trying to push this forward, manipulating our own words. So new this year, parents and students would have to sign statements acknowledging that out-of-state colleges might not recognize the coding courses as foreign language credits. A lot of states have run into this problem with their college school system actually accrediting incoming high school students. It's just very vague. Nothing's been ironed out yet, but this is their most recent attempt to try to push this through. we'll keep you updated. The legislative session does not start until March of next year and only runs 2 months, so it'll be a pretty quick turnaround. Linda, I'll be calling on you and FFLA. And now I'd like to spotlight one of our other really, really impassioned advocates, Amanda C. Wall, President of Foreign Language Educators of New Jersey. And let me find her. Amanda, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Amanda, would you like to tell us a little bit about your successful advocacy efforts about introducing legislation on the dual language immersion in your state?
Sure. For many years, I've worked on the national level for advocacy, and in the last several years, I've been working very carefully on the state level advocacy. And what I found with the Seal of Biliteracy, which we were able to get passed, was that it all involved very specific relationships, even more so than at the national level, that would allow us to get to the right people. And so this one kind of happened in an interesting way. I was at the NJTSOL award ceremony. I was seated next to Senator Patrick Diagnan, who is a state senator from New Jersey. He was receiving an award from them that night for supporting English language learners education. And he and I started speaking, and we talked about the Seal of Biliteracy, and amazed both of us that we were able to succeed in getting our governor to sign that bill into law. And then he said to me, "So what's next?" And just right there on the spot, I had to be ready to go. And my immediate go-to is that we needed some dual language immersion work in our state, because we're far behind, comparatively speaking, with other states. And he said, "Well, what needs to happen?" And I made a suggestion of a grant-based program similar to the one that I had recently read about being piloted in Indiana. And he gave me his chief of staff's information, and he asked me to get in touch with him right away, and then got up on the stage and accepted his award and talked about our conversation, expressing it with me by name, saying that I told Amanda I'm going to work on this, and then turned to the entire crowd and said, "You can consider me your champion for education. Whatever we need to do to put New Jersey first, we will." And I said, "Okay, here we go." And so I immediately contacted his chief of staff and worked with him to provide models from several different programs, both the statewide programs in Delaware and Utah, as well as the piloted grant program in Indiana, which I thought would be a better model for us. And we used that information. I worked closely with his chief of staff, and we developed legislation that they actually introduced this year, which I wasn't sure they were going to. We were thinking of waiting till next year when we have a new governor, but they introduced it and it passed the Senate unanimously. And so now we're at a point where we need to get it through the other house, which is the Assembly here in New Jersey. And we have a lot of great support for that. The question is just getting it to be heard on the floor, and I'm working on that now. But in the midst of all of this, which was incredible, the challenge that we have now is we've got this governor's race. And the chief of staff for Senator Diagnan's office actually did an amazing thing, which was I asked him to get us in touch with the people who were the education advisors to the campaigns currently. And the one that they were connected to was the Murphy campaign, and he is now the Democratic candidate. So they put me directly in touch with the person in charge of his education platform, and I was able to get a face-to-face meeting with her, explain what we're working on, where we are, where we've come from, and what we wanted. And my big ask for her was that I would like him to put something in his platform, specifically on his education platform, about the value of language education. Now that's still unfolding. We're dealing with a lot of other issues here in New Jersey right now, but she and I have been going back and forth about this, and we're trying to get him to put this in his platform. He's the perfect person to do this because Phil Murphy is a former ambassador to Germany and insisted that all of his children learn German. So I feel like we've made some great steps forward despite the political climate on the broader scale. And I'm hopeful that in the next year, we'll be able to move things forward and catch up in some ways with dual language immersion, and potentially have a candidate who will place in their platform the value of world language education.
Amanda, that's a great story. When I talked to you earlier today, I was thinking about it, and it's not about just happenstance, it's about being prepared. And I think that you being right there on the spot, having all those facts and data points ready to go, at your fingertips probably made the big difference here. So
Well,
congratulations.
Thanks, Trey. I just wanted to say that I think it's very important, and I've been working with my board right now at FLENG to really develop those points where we can, like, entry points into conversations when you happen to run into people or when you happen to be put into situations where you can make something out of nothing. And to that end, I just want to also say that FLENG has decided recently in the last year that to dovetail on ACTFL'S initiatives with regard to teacher recruitment, we've started a committee as a kind of tangential committee for working with teacher educators across the state and members of our board to recruit teachers, to start working on trying to find ways to bring more teachers into the profession. So I thank ACTFL for everything you're doing to help us with that.
That's great. Thanks, Amanda. And, you know, it's great for you all to share information, because we saw Israel Herrera from Indiana putting up that they created a dual language immersion grant program, and I know it's been inspirational to other states to get that going as well. And Israel also asked about the Paul Simon Study Abroad Award and what's going on with the WLARA, the World Language Advancement and Readiness Act. So Matt's going to give us a little brief update on those two.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. So there's unfortunately not a ton to update with. The Paul Simon Study Abroad Program Act, for those who don't know, it was introduced by Dick Durbin, who's a Democrat from Illinois, and Roger Wicker, who's a Republican from Mississippi. And would create a competitive grant program for universities and colleges to help expand study abroad programs. Right now, it was introduced. It was referred to the Senate Help Committee, which has jurisdiction over those issues, and it's currently still in committee. As Jill mentioned a little bit earlier, the Health Committee right now is kind of in a bit of chaos because they're dealing with healthcare, they're dealing with HEA, so they have a lot going on. So, you know, it's not clear that this is going to be moving very quickly, but it is there, and it is being, you know, worked on by committee staff. Somebody had also asked about WLARA. That bill is currently working its way through the House. It was introduced by Representative David Price, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and referred to two committees, because two committees have jurisdiction. The Ed and Workforce Committee, which is the House's version essentially of the Health Committee, and the Armed Services Committee. The bill is currently being worked on in those committees, and hopefully we'll have some updates soon from the Hill as to the progress they're making in getting those bills through the committee and to the floor.
Great, thanks, Matt. A couple of very important reminders on dates for state advocates to be aware of. First is the Delegate Assembly that will be in conjunction with the ACTFL Convention. It'll be the Thursday before the convention, and it's an important venue for state representatives to be able to share information just like we have today and get the latest updates. And you can get onto the ACTFL website under About ACTFL and click on Assembly of Delegates and get right to the registration. So the other important date to keep in mind is that JNCL, the Joint National Committee for Languages, and National Council for Languages and International Studies, JNCL Nicholas Language Advocacy Days are set for February 15 and 16 in Washington, D.C., and this is a fabulous time to go right to the offices of your senators and representatives and advocate for languages. So we encourage you to put those dates on your calendar. And then finally, we're starting an online community. I'm going to turn it back to Trey, and he's going to tell you about our new online community for advocacy.
We're looking for volunteers, Marty. I see a lot of volunteers already on the call today who I can assure you they will sign up. We are starting this community so that we can have more and more consistent contact with you all. The stories that we share today aren't stories that just happened yesterday. These are stories that come up very frequently, and we need to share them, not only to pat ourselves on the back, but also to give inspiration and ideas to other of our members around the country. So if you can, and if you're interested, it doesn't have to be you just here on the call. You can please invite other people to email me if you're interested. Some of the tasks include just posting some questions once a week or relevant articles that you found online from your state or nationally, and contributing to other threads. We want to keep the conversation moving, especially around our national goals and our state advocacy goals. There's just a few more upcoming dates here that we want to make you aware of in the month of November. We're going to have one more advocacy call, another check-in, right before convention, that week of the 6th. We will reach out to you with an official date and time. The Assembly of Delegates, as we mentioned before, is November 16th, all day in Nashville, and it precedes the convention, which goes on through the rest of the weekend.
So we're going to wrap up now, and thank you all so much for joining us and for sending in your questions, and we will answer any that we didn't get to on the call today. And just thank you again, and I know you all realize how important it is that we pay attention to the important benefits from advocacy, and we have a lot of information on our website, and we will continue to share with you, and we look forward to having you share with us. And we will post this recording and the PowerPoint for you to share with others. Thank you again.
Thank you all.